Hello and welcome to the Give Me the Remote podcast. This is episode 25, our Silver Jubilee. The date is the 18th of December 2018. My name is John and I'm joined in the pod by Sheridan.
Hello.
And boy, the equipment's really kind of getting out of hand in here now, isn't it? But we're hoping we're bringing you a superior audio experience. And not just sounding like idiots mucking around in their living room. Although
Well, now we just sound like professional idiots mucking around in the living room.
Or at least sounding like better sounding idiots mucking around in our living rooms. So, what are we doing first?
Let's do BlacKkKlansman.
Yeah, man. Spike Lee's latest film.
Yep, just came. Is it on? What did we watch it on Netflix or did we bought it? Didn't we on iTunes? Yep.
iTunes. So streaming on iTunes, standard rental at the moment, so at least you don't have to buy it, I say with making air quotes. I've always liked Spike Lee films. I think this is one of his very best.
I feel like it's a return to form for him.
A lot of people are calling it a return to form, and I think so. I think, though, there's a lightness of tone and a general fun to watch that I don't think is
Despite the very, very serious subject matter.
Yeah, but there's never characterised his work before. Generally, a Spike Lee film is a pretty dark trudge.
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I think some of the earlier ones had a certain lightness about them, and music obviously always features quite heavily in his films.
The music is great in this one.
Music is great.
Old folk songs, yeah.
So based on a true story, but we might talk about that later. So it follows the first black police officer in Colorado Springs Police Department, a guy named Ron, who suffers some, pretty bad racism in his workplace, but somehow finds himself in a situation where he infiltrates the KKK, and he pretty much does this just by randomly calling up a local KKK chapter.
In the paper. So
yeah, he saw the paper, he saw the ad, rings up the chapter, pretends to be a white guy, and that when he does the impersonation of the white guy voice is pretty funny. And but funny, but also does make you reflect on a lot of stereotypes and things like that. So rings them up, gets recruited. Of course, he can't turn up because he's black. So he sends his Jewish, not partner, but I think like team member, Flip, who's played by Adam Driver, who I was pleasantly surprised to see him doing this role because I feel like after Star Wars, he could have gone either way.
Well, he had done all that stuff in Girls, so he obviously wasn't a complete loser as an actor, and that was a tough role he had in Girls as well. Yeah,
so I think he's one of the standout performances in this movie. So he's a Jewish guy, although was born Jewish, wasn't raised Jewish as he described it. And one of the best lines of the movie is, "It never mattered about me being Jewish, but suddenly it does," and it just makes you think about how you can live your whole life not identifying with, a certain cultural or religious or race, and then once people start to persecute you, it suddenly is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, that was a classic story told over and over again in the Holocaust in Europe, that there were thousands at least of people who were of Jewish ancestry who didn't think of themselves as Jewish until suddenly the Nazis started. Rounding them up, and that's a very cautionary tale about how things that you don't think are going to affect you do affect you, and you need to be looking at that which attacks the least of us attacks all of us, that sort of thing. Can we talk about the problems I've got with the film?
Yeah.
So it's based on a true story. Ron was real in terms of being the first black member of the Colorado Springs Police Department.
And he did infiltrate the KKK, and he did have phone conversations with David Duke, who's the Grand Wizard of the KKK.
And then the second half of the film, they depart from...
Yeah, so they bring in this...
Not just dramatic license, just a whole other story.
They bring in a bomb, like a sort of a terrorist subplot.
And people get blown up in this thing, and that's complete fabrication. That didn't happen.
Yeah. And actually, you know what? Flip is a complete fabrication. Well, actually, it's not a complete fabrication. So he did have a partner that was white passing that that did go and meet with them, but no one has. His identity has never been revealed because he, as a police officer, feels like he would be open to too much persecution from the KKK.
Yep.
And so it's unknown whether he's Jewish. And Spike Lee added that in as dramatic license.
Yeah, that I can take as dramatic license, particularly when it's identity that's unrevealed. So it can be whatever you want it to be.
Less.
The complete starting with a true story and then completely fabricating the end. And I think it's a good enough story to stand on its own. And then you've got problems where they're taking the language of today, and in particular Donald Trump's election campaign from 2016 onwards, and placing it back in the historical context as a way of saying, look, this is...
There's even references to Hillary Clinton's references to black people during Bill's term.
And I thoroughly enjoyed the jabs at the Trump voting assholes. Hello, all our Trump voting assholes. I don't imagine there are too many of you by this point, but if you're out there, you should really rethink that. So I enjoy those jabs at those people in this, but at the same time, when you're departing from history and even departing from artistic license of truth to just throw a punch, I wonder if it's worth it when they could have told the story without doing those things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I had some problems with that it's put forward as a true story, and it's clearly not a true story. Like 50% of this movie is not real. But I liked the continual references to modern politics, but I think a lot of those references went over my head. And I think they would go over a lot of people's heads, especially if you are not American. And I thought that the female characters were somewhat...
Were there female characters?
Well, I mean, I actually think one of the most interesting characters in the movie is Connie, who plays a wife of one of the KKK members, and she desperately tries to become one of them. And they just sort of dismiss her constantly.
She's a misogynist, but she's still... Yeah, and those women...
But that was an interesting character.
Those women who enable these men, a bit like the honey badgers with the MRA movement today, they are weird units. They are interesting units. There's probably some more stories to tell about them.
But, if he's referencing modern society...
I don't think you need that. I can believe that woman existed.
But I mean,
like
she could have been a tool for all the female white Trump voters.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she's not. That doesn't really come to full fruition. She's pretty superficial.
I do want to say that despite some severe reservations about their treatment of the material and totally observing that this is didactic, it's not letting the story unfold and letting you draw your own conclusions. It's hammering you over the head constantly about what your conclusions
but
should
the thing about Spike Lee, though,
it.
He's best when he's hammering you over the head. I think he is.
I don't know. I mean, I think Clockers was one of his best. Where, the story was. It's a bit like selective editing. You don't need to be biased in your reporting as a reporter. You just need to tell the stories that reinforce your point. And he's already telling the stories that reinforce his point, so I think he could be a little more even-handed sometimes. But that's a very minor criticism. This movie was so much better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's well-paced, it's interesting.
Light and dark.
It is unbelievable, and we've spoken a lot about how there's a lot of parts of the story that aren't true, but the parts of the story that aren't true are actually believable.
Ron has his KKK certificate framed in his office.
It's the bits of the story that are true that are unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is just an amazing story to be told.
That's why it disappoints me that they chose to go so far off the story when the story was so good anyway.
Well, the only reason I think they may have done that is because what happened in real life was once they infiltrated, they were basically ordered by their superiors to just shut it down overnight. No,
but the military personnel who they were investigating did all get punished very sadly for being Klansmen.
Yeah, it wasn't really...
Yeah, it was a bit swept under the carpet in the end.
Yeah,
although
it wasn't the exciting
this was also
climax.
Swept under the carpet at the end as well. But
yeah.
Anywho, all in all, if you were on the fence about whether to watch this, I would say give it a go, because I was on the fence about whether to watch it. And in the end, I really enjoyed it, despite the fact I have some reservations about it.
Oh, one thing, sorry, just before we rate it, it only cost them $15 million to make. which I think is...
They really kept the cost down on that. 'Cause
That
the
is
production
so
values
cheap.
are right up
I mean,
there.
that's what the Wikipedia says, so maybe that's not right, but...
There's a lot of exterior sets. There's a big explosion. There's a lot of expensive ideas. So Spike Lee's really got his costs down. Yeah,
I was really surprised. And it has grossed a lot more than that.
I guess you can shoot with much cheaper cameras now than you used to be able to, but yeah.
True.
And lighting rigs and all sorts of things. Awesome. So how many stars?
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Me too. 4 stars. In agreement. High five.
Yay!
So what's next?
Last Kingdom Season 3.
Now, we have reviewed Last Kingdom before, where we did an omnibus of the first 2 seasons.
In preparation for today's review.
Indeed. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, this is what you watch if you like Game of Thrones and there isn't a new season of Game of Thrones to watch.
Which there isn't, and we've been waiting a long time, so we're stuck with Uhtred and King Alfred.
Yes. Having said that...
More historically accurate than Game of Thrones.
Somewhat. Now, there are long parts of this where it's like, there's a dirty, hairy man, and he's talking to another dirty, hairy man, and I don't know which is which or why they're talking to each other.
I agree, especially when they're all blonde, and they're just giant, blonde, hairy men, and you're like, very confused.
Having said that, there are moments when there are just brilliant moments of dialogue, and I suspect they lifted straight out of the book.
Yeah, that's probably right.
And that tends to more than make up for it. There's some very good action scenes in this, and I thought
really good.
I thought the chemistry with the Danish seer, but the sexual chemistry between her
Skade.
and Uhtred,
who's played by a woman who has an unpronounceable name. She's Norwegian.
Is she?
Thea Sophie Loch Ness.
Okay. I thought the sexual chemistry between her and Uhtred was really quite something. You don't normally see that on TV episodics, the sparks.
So as I discussed with you ad nauseum during actually watching it, I was like, I hate her. I don't think she's any good. But then I came to the conclusion of, I'm meant to hate her, so she must be quite good.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's portrayed as an absolutely evil character.
She's a great villain. I mean, she's chopping dudes' heads off and sticking swords in eyes and doing all
terrifying Uhtred, who is supposed to be one of the scariest dudes in Northern Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought she was a welcome addition, and actually, I think that story arc this season was a welcome reprieve from all of the big blonde Danish men that you can never tell the difference between fighting it out. And those political storylines get very confusing in this show.
Yeah.
And not in a good way, not in a good Game of Thrones way, just I don't know what the frig is going on here.
One of the things Game of Thrones is really good at is all of the rival factions have very distinct visual identities.
Yes.
You know, looking at someone and what sort of armour they're wearing and the colour of their banner.
Yeah.
Whose side they're at least nominally on.
Which I guess you can do when you're not historically accurate.
Bingo. Yeah. Whereas in this, frequently, it's just dudes wearing...
fur.
Dudes in fur.
Fur and leather.
And the leather's very ahistorical as well, it should be noted.
Yeah, right.
Everyone just wore a lot of wool back then, as you would if you had no viable means of heating.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I didn't think about that, yeah.
Yeah. So, having said... we got some quibbles. It's not perfect, but it was a good romp. We kept turning back to it with some happiness through the season.
Yeah, and I mean, because the other major storyline is that King Alfred is really sick throughout this whole series, and so it's like he's on his way out, and someone's got to fill that power vacuum. So that creates a bit of tension, or a lot of tension. It also makes you realise you really do not want to have whatever he had at that time, because he looked in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I think it was some sort of stomach cancer they were alluding to.
I feel sorry for David Dawson having to play that character. They must have had a lot of grey makeup every day on set. Would have been he just has to
Sheridan's
mope
sort of,
around,
waggling her fingers at her face for the audience at home.
You know who I worked out who I really like in this is that Athelwold character.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think
who's the real arch villain of the piece.
He is.
He's a rat in the woodpile or a snake in the woodpile.
Yeah, Harry McIntyre plays that character, and I think he's really, really good. Just
really
being quite a devilish.
Yeah,
he reminds me a bit of who's the really, really evil one in Game of Thrones? That
Peter Baelish.
No, the one that tortures Reek.
Oh, Ramsey.
Ramsey. He's a bit like that, but not as full.
He's not as physically terrifying as Ramsey.
No, and he doesn't do as many horrible things. But there's that. You kind of like him at some points, but then you really hate him.
He has a little bit of roguish charm to him while being around. And he certainly gets his comeuppance as well.
Yeah.
Or a comeuppance. I think you're right there. The addition of Skade, the Danish female seer, which is sort of part shaman, part witch.
It just gave everyone someone to hate.
But just also really added some depth to the story. It wasn't just big dudes with ponytails shouting at each other.
You could follow him.
Yeah.
And they bring back Breda, who is in the first series. I think, was she in the second series as well?
She might have had a minor...
But she definitely went out in the season 2. I really like her as a character. I think there's actually some depth to her for a female character at that period.
Yeah, I think they've been working on the show. I think it actually grew in this season. But let's be honest, there is still incomprehensible, hairy, dirty people shouting at each other for reasons you're not entirely understanding.
Yeah.
But there are enough really good moments, and they've widened the repertoire of the characters, and I mean the stuff around, Uhtred's brother dying, that was actually quite touching.
Yeah.
And they get across some of the spiritual significance of the Vikings, things like, if you die without your weapon in your hand, you can't get to Valhalla, and you're stuck in cold hell, and oh god, how are we going to rescue it? Things that seem a little silly to modern folk, but actually meant the whole world to people in another era, so it gets you in their mindset, I think. Yeah.
What are you giving it?
I'm going to give it 3.5.
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Whoa. Okay, Sheridan's heading up in the world. Okay,
what's next?
Dumplin.
So then, is it a Netflix original?
Straight to Netflix.
I think
there's no such thing as a Netflix original, is there? There's just things that didn't appear anywhere else before they appeared on Netflix.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure I read this cost about $15 million to make, which maybe that's the going rate for movies now. But, so, directed by Anne Fletcher, who is, you probably don't know her, but started off doing, like, kind of teen movies, so Step Up, and then became, like, rom-com queen with 27 Dresses and The Proposal. So I think if you know that, you kind of know what you're getting into with this. Stars Jennifer Aniston as I was going to say washed up beauty queen mum, but she's not really washed up, is she? Because she's sort of like the pageant organizer.
She's aging though.
She's aging,
and that's part of her character.
But she's still very much involved in the pageant world, and she has a daughter
she still looks like Jennifer Aniston, so
she does. She's
doing okay.
She has a daughter who's a plus size daughter. Called Dumplin, who's played by Danielle MacDonald, and Danielle decides she's going to enter the beauty competition as a bit of a rebellious act, and then sort of taken on a journey of everyone's journey of the pageant. What have you got to say?
I thought, Dumplin, I should say, they did quite a good job of portraying all the horrible, worst things in a angry, slightly lost teenager. She'd had many likable characteristics, and they showed that, but I thought she was desperately unfair to her mother, and I thought her mother was actually quite reasonable and trying very hard with her own journeys and travails throughout this, and I actually like the fact they conveyed that unfairness of the teenage daughter.
There's definitely some pretty decent exploration of these two quite different worlds these women live, even though they're mother and daughter, because they have a very different lived experience based on their bodies. Yeah. So that is dealt with quite well.
But there's also Dumplin has the guy working at the diner she works in, who is a bit of a dreamboat.
Oh, he's
totally into her.
Massive dreamboat.
Totally into her, and she's angry about that too.
To be honest with you, it's funny you say this, because I actually found one of the problems for me with the movie was that Dumpling's, in fact, all the teenagers' dialogue is a little too mature. There wasn't a lot of bugger off mum, slamming the door, walking away tantrums that you would have if you're a teenager.
Yeah, in my experience, teenagers can be quite mature in their dialogue.
They can, but not all the time. And there was...
There weren't too many dropped lines. It was a movie, however. There was a part of the story where Dumplin goes and hangs out for, I believe it was 10 days. You thought it was 6 weeks. We might have misheard. One of us has misheard the dialogue there. Goes and hangs out with the drag queens who teach us some theatre skills, and she does a blow-away performance that...
Because Dumplin has no talent, so you obviously need that to be in a beauty contest.
Perform the talent portion of a beauty
So
contest.
she gets taught that by a group of drag queens.
Who, it was a bit Luke Skywalker-esque, the way they're like, oh, we loved your dead aunt, and so we will pass the torch of showmanship onto you. Including allowing 17-year-olds into a licensed premises in Texas, which my understanding of the law in those parts is those staff were risking jail time. Not long jail time, but actual jail time for letting those girls
They
into
really
their bar.
liked the aunt.
Yeah.
It was after hours.
No, they let them in during hours.
Oh, they did too, yes.
Yeah. So, the thing that slightly annoyed me there was, you have the magic, you are the chosen one. So even though you haven't put the work in, because she was competing against that talent show, against girls who maybe they were horrible and maybe they were super skinny and unlikable, but had probably spent years honing the craft of what they were trying to perform, and someone comes along and puts a bit of glitter on and some sparkles and is suddenly blowing them away. And
to be fair, that's not really what happens, though, in the end. I mean, she receives some pleasant sort of hand claps.
Yes.
Polite hand clap, but I wouldn't say there was a standing ovation.
No, but anyway, I was slightly annoyed by the way that side of the storyline ran.
I did quite like, though, because she's also in a group of friends with another plus-size girl that decides to enter, and...
But she gets quite angry about it. You know, and it's a beautiful line. I'm not the Joan of Arc of fat people.
Yeah.
And, just because I'm doing it doesn't mean you get to follow me as well.
But they do sort of address that, you know, this other girl is on her own journey that's quite different and is quite accepting of her body and quite sort of positive all the time.
Probably has tougher mother issues as well, though.
Probably.
But she seems to handle that with much more dignity with her mother.
And has a queer friend. I think I would describe them as queer, gender ambiguous. I can't recall if she was...
The one out of Scream.
Yeah, I can't recall if she came out as a lesbian during this movie, but anyway, she's queer. There's something, she's queer. Well, that's the character was portrayed that way. Well, she wears a suit, you know, she's sort of, you know...
There's a bit of androgyny going on anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but I liked it, so they form this kind of, you know, grouping of friends that are others. They're not mainstream accepted bodies and personas, and then they team up with the drag queens, and the drag queens being also another group of others have, you know, they support each other and empower each other, and that's actually quite a nice, I think that is a really positive storyline, that because this show is a family show, family movie, and I think that's a really positive story for a family to sit down and watch this movie about a bunch of, you know, queer people and...
Oh, absolutely.
But, you know, I think that's a nice thing to do.
Despite my quibbles with bits of the storyline, and even then, like, I'll accept the fact that Dumplin was probably being quite horrible to her mum. That's what teenage girls do.
Yeah.
So that's legitimate storytelling. And we are remiss if we don't mention that this is a movie about Dolly Parton fandom.
Yes, we would be extremely remiss because you will listen to a lot of Dolly Parton in this movie.
And it's fun, and they make it seem great. And
I feel as though Dolly Parton's having one of those, like, kind of...
late springs?
Yeah, moments. But maybe that's because she's kind of always been... I don't know, she's had her fan base, but hasn't always been mainstream. And I think now there's this kind of mainstream acceptance that she's very iconic in music in America.
Yeah, she's a magnificent songwriter.
Yeah.
And a great performer, and those things you can't take away from her. I do kind of feel that if all you're doing, particularly as a teenage girl in 2018, is listening to Dolly Parton songs, you might be missing out on a lot of really amazing stuff.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But I'm not saying that doesn't happen out there. And the idea that these girls are having their Dolly parties and that they find a drag troupe that just does Dolly Parton numbers and they bond over it, I like that. And it is this idea that even in what we think of as a culturally homogenous area like Texas, that out-groups still exist and still find things to bond over. And all of us, no matter how normal, because, I mean, Lord knows we're two whiteys sitting in a very white city. It's not like we're the biggest, most excluded, marginalised people on the planet.
No.
But there are still things we have in common with people who are a bit different and offbeat from everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a nice story.
I like to think I've got some empathy.
Well,
and I think you do.
There's that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I reckon this is about a 4-star movie. Good fun just to throw on. If you got Netflix, it's free.
I think it's a great family movie. All female cast. I mean, the only man in this cast is basically a sex symbol who's treated like a
and
sex
he's objectified.
Symbol. He is objectified. I was objectified.
There are the drag queens as well, but
true, but I'm not sure.
They're kind of identifying as women, I guess.
Yeah,
so.
I wouldn't say, they're not cisgender men.
You're right. Absolutely, everyone in the movie except from the objectified sex symbol is female identifying.
Yeah. And you didn't even notice it until I mentioned it, which is fantastic.
That's good. It's 2018. We're getting new stories through this stuff, which is really great. We talked about this last week with Doctor Who, which we're also going to talk about later. But apparently, the ratings for this season were off the charts because they were reaching new audiences with new stories. Who'd have thought? Cool. Did you give this a rating?
Oh, 4 stars.
4 stars. Yeah, 4 from me as well. Another high five.
Yay!
And now we've got some fan mail.
We do. So, last week we had a look at Doctor Who, or you did, and I
talked about Doctor Who.
I said I'd never watched it before.
You scoffed at it, yes.
And I scoffed at it and realised I was scoffing at something that I didn't understand. So then my cousin sent a very long message about what I should do if I want to start watching.
Based on listening to the podcast, so good work.
So we've probably ignored most of these suggestions, so sorry, Rod. So he said that don't start with season 11 as a jumping point. Is season 11 where we started?
No.
So I don't understand because, okay, so we've started with the Billy Piper one.
Yeah, so we've started on...
Which they call season 1 episode...
S1 episode 1 in the modern era.
So is season 11 the end of the old era?
No, season 11 that's just finished is the most latest of the new era.
Oh, okay, so don't start with that. Well, actually, we haven't done that.
We followed him there. We're not going back to the 1960s. It's not happening. Don't
diss the special effects of the classic series, which you did in the last review.
I think it's a fair cop.
Anyway... He disagrees. And I can't comment because I haven't watched the old ones. So, and third...
I also said good storytelling covered it, but,
Third, the final... He thought that Sylvester McCoy was the best character, best portrayal of the character, and so we have skipped past him as well. So one of your suggestions we followed, and we have started with season 1, episode 1. I just had to... John just grimaced because there was no other way for me to do that other than just blatantly open my beer.
Needed a beer. So, Doctor Who, Sheridan has watched an episode now.
So I've watched an episode. So Christopher Eccleston is the Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. I didn't mind him.
The Doctor.
Oh.
In canon, he's never called Doctor Who. They make jokes about Doctor Who, like Abbott and Costello, Doctor Who. He's just the Doctor.
Can I say something?
Who nerds will really jump on you on that. So,
it's really hard to research a show like this without getting any spoilers.
Yeah, right.
But I managed to do it, so it's a poorly researched segment of the podcast, unlike all the others.
Yeah, people will really notice the difference there.
It's amazing. So, and one interesting fact that I learnt was... So the show had been off air for 16 years.
Yes.
John's looking at me like, yeah, I know all this.
Well, we talked about it last week, but yeah.
Oh, well, I wasn't listening then. I haven't listened to anything anyone's ever said about Doctor Who until now. Because now it involves me.
Yeah, there's your empathy coming out.
So, 2005, it had been off air for 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Russell T Davies, who made Queer as Folk,
yes,
which I was quite into,
yeah.
He's responsible.
Yeah.
I was crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so season 1...
Wait till you meet Captain Jack. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Season 1, episode 1, you're introduced to Rose, who's played by Billy Piper.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a shop girl. So British, being a shop girl.
We're plenty of shop girls. They're all working in the shops.
We don't call them shop girls.
Yeah, we do. Plenty of people do.
I think you call them checkout chicks, don't you?
Well, not if they're working in like a clothes store.
Oh,
Checkout chicks are at the supermarket.
I'd call them a sales assistant.
Well, would you? But you mean shop girl.
So she's a shop girl. And she goes to work one day and the mannequins come alive and try and kill her. And then she goes home and hangs out with her boyfriend. And then he turns into a mannequin, which... No. Isn't that what happened?
No, he doesn't turn into the mannequin until they go and try and find the Doctor Who stalker.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he eventually turns into the mannequin.
Yes.
But I've had a really good joke there.
Okay.
You didn't really notice much difference.
Yeah.
So
Plastic Mickey is one of those things the fans scream about at each other.
They don't like it? They're all very diverse.
It was a tough thing where the show was trying to show that he'd been taken over and turned plasticized. So they made him look really plasticized, but she couldn't see that he was plasticized. And it's I think it's a moment where they break continuity. Well, not continuity, but they certainly mess with the audience's perceptions in a way that was quite awkward. He
has some very sculpted eyebrows. They'd fit in well in 2018.
He was meant to look like a moving shop mannequin.
With the eyebrow craze that we now have, which we didn't have in 2005.
No.
So she meets the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of still a bit...
Right at the start. The Doctor's in there really early.
He is really early. But
long before Mickey turns up.
You know, it's a bit kind of unclear who he is in the beginning.
Yeah, well, he's meant to have an air of mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then...
There's a lot of foreshadowing in all the things he says, though. But yeah.
She joins him in the TARDIS and they
ditches
pop
Mickey.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, she just runs away from Mickey into the older man's van and they head off down the highway together.
Do you think he's that much older than her?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He'd be 20 years older than her if it's a day.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Actually, that's true because I think...
he's a Time Lord. He's like 900 years old.
I think Billy Piper is now about 36 or 37 and he is about 54. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right.
Well, not 20, 12 years later. Yeah.
So, yeah, what did I think?
I would note that for those who aren't Who fans who might be thinking of following Sheridan's path on this, S01E01 is a necessary step. It is by no means a high point in the storytelling of the series. It's just they go through some motions they have to go through to get the ball rolling.
I felt like I was learning some things. I think this whole Time Lord thing is very unclear to me how this works.
Well, there's a lot of storytelling to get you on speed on that.
I think he's pretty good. I think they seem to have some good chemistry.
Okay. Does
it become sexual? Does the Doctor never have sex?
The Doctor is never...
Actually, I shouldn't ask, should I?
The Doctor is never seen to have a physical relationship with his companions.
I think he wears a bit too many of those boxy leather jackets that were quite popular at the time.
Yeah.
They have not aged well.
Perhaps
In
not.
fact, the entire noughties fashion has not gone down well at all.
I thought some of the jeans were pretty cool. I think we can go back to having cool jeans. I think it's boring just everyone wearing Uniqlo tight-fitting stuff. You need some buckles hanging off stuff.
There was a lot of random shit hanging off stuff, wasn't there, in the noughties? I thought Mickey... I hope we don't see him again.
Oh, really?
I don't know about him.
Okay.
I mean, he seemed like he didn't have a lot of depth, Mickey.
Mickey was meant to be a pretty crap boyfriend. That was portrayed accurately.
Is he meant to be a crap boyfriend, or he just sort of seemed like an uninspired boyfriend?
He's a bit of nothing.
Yeah, like he's not an offensive boyfriend.
Literally ditched him in the road and got in the van with the old dude.
Yeah.
Who was saying, "Come join me on the road. I'll show you some adventures."
She was like, "I'm done with this shop girl business with my boring boyfriend who seems like a nice guy, but he's not very exciting."
Anyway, I'm not going to spoil that, but so how would you rate
these
S01E01 Rose?
Hang on, I just got a question though.
Sure.
These autons, which is what the mannequins are.
Yes.
I feel like now what's going to happen to me is I'm going to learn a whole bunch of words that I didn't really need to know. It's going to push out other words in my brain.
Yeah.
But I'll be able to converse with Who fans, so maybe...
Quite a lot of them, yeah. So Autons are definitely, they're part of old canon. Some of the more terrifying episodes from the 70s involve them.
Is that because it's quite easy to make humans look like mannequins?
Yeah, there's that, and the whole idea that all these mannequins in these shops go from being just things that are around
Is
you
is it meant to be some sort of comment on consumerism, perhaps?
That too.
I didn't feel like there's a lot of political messaging going on.
Sometimes it's more overt than other times.
Right.
There tends to be an agenda going on there. The Autons, like I said, they're a villain that's been used before. And the idea that the everyday can suddenly become terrifying is something that they do play on a lot.
Yes.
And partly because it's really cheap and partly because it's quite scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What am I going to give it? What do you think I'm going to give it?
I reckon it'd be solid 3, maybe.
I'm going to give it 3.
Yeah. And I think
there was a bit of a bonus bump up there for optimism about the future.
Okay. All right, I think we've this has been quite a long episode. We've talked quite enough. Sound wasn't quite where I wanted it to be because I didn't pay attention to all the dials, but hopefully we're sounding okay now. If not, we do plan to get better. Thanks very much, folks. If you'd like to send us any emails, gmtrpodcast@gmail.com is the place to do it. Alternatively, just leave comments on the Facebook, the Twitter, the YouTube. I've got to say, the YouTube fandom is really surprising me. They make up about 30% of our listeners.
I love the YouTube fans.
Good on you, YouTube. So leave a comment, say
good
hello.
Good on you, YouTube fans.
Suggest, anyone wants to suggest a show we should be watching, we're open to that. And I think that's us done for the week.
See you, folks.
See you, folks.